So this year, just in time for my birthday, our entire family, including me, got COVID. How festive. Hello all, welcome back to my channel. 2021 has been a great year in some ways, horrid in others. I have been sick this year probably more times than I've been in years. I'm currently recovering from my third cold in 3 months. I'm, trying to get sick once a month, so I appreciate not being sick the rest of the month. Anyway, end of June, my dad, who I've said before is a pastor, did a funeral for a family, and I think about 10 people who attended had COVID. He started feeling sick maybe 3 days later, had a fever, and didn't know why. He didn't know anyone at the funeral had COVID, so he didn't get tested for that until he heard about a week later. My parents live next door. We quarantined, and of course, the inevitable happened. My brother got it, and then my mom. We were in constant contact via Facebook Messenger, and my dad just wasn't getting better. I want to stop here, rewind, and go back to my second trimester when COVID started to affect things like hospital visitation and such, because I was so bitter. It's my first pregnancy. I never thought I'd ever be pregnant, and I don't even know if my mom can be in the delivery room with me and my husband. And each week, I'm worried I'll have to come to my regular checkups alone. I didn't believe COVID could affect someone my age in a dangerous way, or anyone without pre-existing conditions under the age of 60. Between mainstream media fear-mongering and then the other side of that telling everyone stores should stay open, masks won't slow the spread, etc., etc., my anxiety and depression were at their peak during my pregnancy, and I wasn't about to add a pandemic to that. I didn't have time for it. I didn't have headspace for it. Are we gonna have church next week or close the doors? People, friends, family members tearing each other apart online over who is morally superior. The side I fell down on was this is overblown and it's getting in the way of me having my baby. Back to 2021. The first few days, my mom and brother are sick. My mom is terrified. Mostly for dad, but the symptoms are really weird, really awful, and really random. They're nauseous, exhausted, no appetite, body aches, throwing up, their fevers won't stay down. One day it seems like it's getting better, the next day it's actually worse. Then, early July, my husband catches it. I don't know how. He was never in the same space as my parents, and I kept testing negative. About a week into it for my brother, he's doing much better. He's 29, but my dad is doing much worse. He isn't able to do anything. He's delirious, like babbling nonsense and coughing nonstop, just winded. He's 57, no pre-existing conditions. It's not until I realize I have COVID. My mom and I are talking on Messenger, and she's telling me he doesn't even realize where he is. And I told her he needs to go to the doctor now. We blew it off in the beginning. Dad literally never gets sick, and the rare occasions that he does, he acts like it's the end of the world even though he's doing all right. He'd make it to church to preach even if he was dying. At this point, he'd already canceled 2 services, coming up on the 3rd. He just couldn't do it. I was in my own private hell. My husband couldn't work due to quarantine, but by the time COVID caught up with me, he was actually doing all right. Except now, Sam and I were sick, and I could not take care of Sam the way I wanted. That first week, really the first 4 days, I was so sick to my stomach. I couldn't eat, I could barely get my medication down. My depression meds, acid reflux meds, birth control, body aches, I had a fever that wouldn't go down. Sam was run down, he was tired, but thankfully, he did well. After 2 days, he was eating, drinking the regular amounts for him, and playing like there's just nothing to it. I was terrified, actually. It was just so freaking random from day to day. I wanted to be in the hospital. But I knew they wouldn't keep me unless I was having respiratory problems. It turns out my dad was. When you get COVID, at least here where we live, the hospital drops off a bag of supplies, one of which being an oximeter that tests your blood oxygen levels. For whatever reason, they didn't drop mom and dad's off until several days later. My dad tested his oxygen and it was 82. It's supposed to be at least 92 or above for you to function. My dad's biggest fear was if he went to the hospital, he'd be intubated. When he did go to the hospital, they told him if he declined and he didn't want to be intubated, he would just die. It was just a shock for everybody. He was in the hospital 6 or 7 days on oxygen, and when he came home, he had to have the oxygen. The same day he got out of the hospital, a woman a year younger that we knew that had come to church died of COVID in that same hospital with no pre-existing conditions. The doctors couldn't figure out why COVID was so severe for Dad, but the first time I saw him since everybody quarantined, he was about 10 pounds lighter and hooked up to this huge oxygen machine. There were these huge wires running from the living room to the bedroom, and he could only take the oxygen off to go to the bathroom. And when he did, his levels dropped severely, and he had to come right back and put the oxygen back on. He still had to have oxygen probably a month, well after everyone was better. It took me about 18 days to get back to a place where I felt somewhat normal. And worst of all for me, I lost my smell and taste for 2 weeks. For my first 4 days, Fernando took care of Sam, and then I had to go right back to being a mom. I took 2 Tylenol every day for about 8 days, just so I wouldn't have the body aches and to keep the fever down. Sam actually didn't get a fever. Before he was born, I didn't even think he could get COVID. He did. My dad could have died. All the anger I harbored because Mom wasn't in the delivery room with me, because of COVID, all the fights I had, the time I wasted online trying to make people understand what I lost because of the pandemic. Let me just interject. I do not agree with mask mandates. I do not agree with vaccine mandates. I do, in several ways, believe we were manipulated by fear to be divided. The fact that there are anti-vaxxers is just divisive language in and of itself, not including livelihoods that were lost due to shutdowns and lies we were told by Fauci to make us compliant. I'm not downplaying that side of the suffering. What I am saying is a healthy fear for COVID is warranted. You shouldn't let it control your life. You shouldn't let it sever relationships. But there is another side of suffering that others have experienced. It is real. There is a legitimate reason people are vaccinating. My dad has officiated over half a dozen funerals for people here where we live, in a town of 7,000 people, who have died of COVID. Some not very much older than him, and some younger than him. Some with pre-existing conditions, some without pre-existing conditions. We don't know enough about COVID to understand why it affects people in vastly different ways. We've been told a lot of information, then that information is retracted, and then by another side we're told a whole other set of rules. The truth is, we just don't know enough, and time is going to reveal more to us. Thankfully, it hasn't been a super large majority of the population lost to it. You might say something like, only 500 kids have gotten COVID and died. But of those 500 kids that died, what if that was your child? See, for the mother and father that did happen to, of course they're getting vaccinated. Of course they're encouraging other people to vaccinate. Of course they strongly believe in it. They suffered a profound loss. Whether the numbers seem huge to you or not, every person that has been lost mattered. Whether they were vaccinated or unvaccinated, they mattered. And the people who lost them are suffering, and they're angry, and they're scared. What I didn't realize at the time, and what I realize and fully appreciate now, is empathy and compassion. We're in this together. We're not divided. You're not alone. Everybody is suffering in their own way. We need to be compassionate. We need to care about everyone's experience, and the Bible teaches that. I should know better, but I didn't, and I failed. I had a lot of rage inside me over this, and a lot of arrogance, and it got me nowhere. It changed nothing for the better. And I'm not trying to scare anyone. I just want you to appreciate the people in your lives and not let them go so easily over arguments on the internet, over misunderstandings and fear and anger. Personal choice is great, and it's no one else's business. But I'd encourage you to make a personal choice to pursue peace with each individual and be understanding. Be kind. Leave your mind open so you're always learning. You can't learn a thing you think you know. Now, a few vitally important things I learned about COVID that I'd like to pass on to other people who, God forbid, may get COVID in the future. Number 1, your oxygen level is so important. Get an oximeter. Get an oximeter and check it frequently throughout the day. Your oxygen can drop in a matter of hours, which brings me to the second thing. If your oxygen is below 92, go to the hospital. I don't think there are enough people encouraging this. Don't wait if you don't feel good. Just go. 3, there will probably be symptoms months after COVID. That can be kind of scary, but it's normal. I had weird pains in my hands and in my feet, specifically 2 months after, and I had a bad cough for at least a month after having COVID. I've also had 3 colds since COVID, and I don't know if it's related, but my immune system seems kind of weak. Be careful out there. Stay safe. Today, I'm happy to report my family is healthy. I just wanted to share part of my experiences with you. Thanks for listening, and until next time, bye.